Now comes the real fun. The perfect place for your demise. Let the show begin!
Well, hi there, little Rose.
With Shadows of Rose now out, the story of RE Village is now complete. On some fronts, it's an enjoyable DLC. It gets experimental, the character beats are well done, and there's a great horror section. That said, we traverse through familiar territory, and some lingering questions remain unanswered. Compare that to Resident Evil 7, which had a wide variety of DLC with new areas. Shadows of Rose is a product from a smaller team. Resident Evil 4 Remake has received the developmental focus. Revisiting the base game before Shadows of Rose, I wasn't as high on Village as I was the first time around. It's still a very enjoyable journey. It's a better game than most AAA offerings. Yet it lacks the laser-like focus of Resident Evil 7. There are elements that had the potential for further exploration. Due to shifting focus onto the Resident Evil 4 remake, it doesn't feel as complete. Sure, you could say that about any game, but here, there feels like there's more they want to explore. In this video, we will first take a look at the Shadows of Rose DLC. We'll then look back at the base game and additions to Mercenaries. I'll also give some brief thoughts about RE-verse and the future of the Resident Evil franchise. This video is one giant spoiler for Village along with 7. If you want a deeper look into the base game, check out my video on the card here in the description, which I did around its release.
Freak. Just disgusting. Please just stop!
Shadows of Rose continues the story of the Winters, this time with a teenage Rose Winters, who we saw the epilogue of Village. This puts the timeline at around 2036. I was thinking they might go the way of aging her faster as Evelyn did, but that isn't the case. Kay from Chris's Hound Squad meets up with Rose to tell her that removing her powers is possible. She's gone through bullying as a result of the powers and doesn't fit in with other kids. Chris wants her in the squad, but she doesn't want to join. She jumps at the opportunity to remove her powers. Through a piece of the Mega Mice seat, Rose can enter its collective consciousness and find the crystal to remove her powers. What's been going on in the world since then? Who knows? A lot can happen in 16 years. What's going on with Chris in the BSAA that was hinted at the end of the base game? Who knows?
BSAA didn't send soldiers. This is a bioweapon.
What the hell were they thinking?
Orders, Captain.
Pick up the rest of the squad. Plot a course for BSAA Europe HQ.
There were plans for a Chris-centered DLC that was scrapped to focus more on Shadows of Rose. I'm fine with keeping this DLC self-contained on Rose. It reduces the chances of introducing plot threads that never receive closure. We already have plenty of those in the series. Controlling Rose will notice one of the major changes, the change of perspective. Shadows of Rose is in third person only. We can now play the base game in third person. The shift makes sense due to some gameplay sections present and Rose as a character. Ethan was more of a blank slate, at least to begin with, and didn't talk much unless prompted. The first person perspective worked better for a character like Ethan. Once again, it's amusing how far Capcom goes to hide his face. Try spinning the camera around in the third person and Ethan turns away. I appreciate the commitment, although I found it goes too far in this DLC at a key moment, but more on that later. How is Rose as a character? She talks more than her dad, but doesn't go overboard. She doesn't comment on every little thing. They found the right balance. She's likable, but also has a bit of that bratty teenager attitude. But she is very much Ethan's daughter.
Yeah, I get it. Fuck you.
The best moments of the DLC involve her and the relationship she never had with her dad. Stepping into the Mega Mycete consciousness, we're taken to the basement of Lady D's castle. This brings up one of the DLC's main sticking points, the reuse of prior areas. Of course, the areas receive tweaking, there's a different order of the critical path. There are new challenges and gameplay elements. That said, it is a letdown after how much the DLC in 7 offered in regards to new areas. As mentioned earlier, it's evident that there was a smaller team working on this DLC compared to the ones in 7. Most hands are on deck with the RE4 remake. The basement helps set the mood of the DLC with mold everywhere and many Rose copies.
You look just like me. Who are you? I'm Rose. What's going on here? Let's keep moving.
We're introduced to the Face Eaters, one of the main enemies in the DLC. They're more or less zombies in how they behave and move around. I found juking around them more difficult than the RE2 or RE3 remake. We'll receive help from a presence writing on the wall, going by Michael. Who could this be? Is it someone we know? I enjoyed these little bits to help flesh out Rose as a character.
Everything! None of this was supposed to happen. No. The reason I came here hasn't changed. I need that crystal. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you! I was hoping for a pony, but I guess this'll do.
We'll come across the Duke here, or the Masked Man. He's not on our side here. He does work as a foil. He had such a strong presence in the base game. It's a nice twist to see him work against us.
Let's see how fast this one is. Find her! Hunt her down!
Now we get access to Rose's powers. There's an odd oversight here. Playing through the base game, I turned off show tutorials and hints. I don't need the game to always remind me about crafting when I'm low on resources. So I wasn't told how to use my powers until I turned that back on. As we progress, we'll get further unlocks of our powers. Future playthroughs, I get it, but I'm surprised they didn't have something to override turning off tutorials to notify us of how to use our powers. We could use them to slow down enemies for a time. We could use them to unlock barriers to progress further. We need to collect an item to replenish our power, and we can't craft any more of them. You're never swimming in stock. These had different challenges, although they could have got more mileage out of them. There were moments of great tension where I'm trying to clear a barrier when face eaters were chasing me. There is a great bit where Michael helps us select the right target when we're under a timer. There were only a couple puzzles present in Shadows of Rose. Like most RE puzzles, they're palette cleansers between stretches of combat or chases. Nothing too challenging, but nothing that makes them stand out. Coming across Lady Dimitrescu's bathtub here. How much water does she use for each bath? Does she bathe in blood? Since we're in the castle, let's talk about the Lady D.
Well, Ethan Winters. You escaped my little brother's idiot games, did you? Let's see how special you are.
The structure of the DLC gave Capcom an easy out for bringing her back. Sure, they did for Mercenaries, more on that later, but Capcom captured lightning in a bottle with her and her daughters. I'm surprised they didn't give them some role here. She could have swapped places with the Duke here, no problem. Although Puppet Lady D did return prior to the launch of the DLC, which was nice to see. The next section takes us back to House Beneviento. After what happened there in the base game, they didn't need to do a lot of heavy lifting to build a sense of dread. This time we delve into Rose's psyche in her past, how she's been bullied at school due to her powers, Chris and Mia's involvement with her growing up. I had a sinking suspicion that beyond a couple mentions, Mia would not be a factor in the DLC. That was the case. Rose mentions she hasn't seen her in ages. How long is that? Where is Mia now? Because Mia is such a wildcard character, what are her motivations? She gave up information about the connections to protect her and Ethan, yet she never told Ethan about her past. As well, she kept Ethan's mold abilities a secret, not just from him, but from Chris and the others. So what is she up to? Knowing how the series loves to drop plot threads, it wouldn't surprise me if we never find out and she never returns. We had a giant fetus last time around. This time, the Mia mannequin doll returns. There are some good gotcha moments of re-entering an area to have one standing right there. Then comes the DLC's creepiest moments with the Mia mannequins following us. They only follow when we look away. It's great tension as new ones enter the fold. The way it builds up as we return to an area only for another mannequin to be there. Simple but effective, a large part due to the unsettling movements. Then comes the stealth section. You know how stealth sections can be in games that aren't based around stealth. They could be some of the worst moments of that game. That wasn't the case here. I found the stealth section the right balance. Not walk in the park, but not trial and error heavy. Much better than the stealth sections with Natalia in Revelations 2. Being shrunk down, pursued by dolls, the music. I got American McGee's Alice vibes from this section. It's like they made the third-person camera option so they could do this part. It's also nice it's stealth that doesn't rely on seeing through walls, detection bars filling up from enemies, or mini-maps. Good old-fashioned third-person stealth. Great tension, great atmosphere. The Mia mannequin stomping around like Godzilla gave me a good chuckle.
You know what happens to little girls who can't play nice, don't you? They get punished.
No way.
We get some downtime of exploring the Winters home when she was a baby. The letter that Ethan leaves for Rose is a great moment. That's why I said earlier that some of the best moments in the DLC come from these character moments.
Happy half-birthday, Rose. My gift to you is a promise. I'll always be there for you, no matter what. I'll be there every birthday to watch you blow out the candles on your cake. I'll be there to make you breakfast and walk you to school every day. I'll be there when you have a bad dream and sing to you until you fall back asleep. I'll hug you tight when you're troubled or worried and tell you that everything's gonna be all right. You are my precious Rose. Never forget that, Dad.
But before we know it, here comes Evelyn. It's not a surprise that their paths would cross one day. Like the fight back in 7, it's nothing noteworthy gameplay-wise. It amounts to a cover shooter. It's more of a narrative fight. I can't help but have a bit of pity for Evelyn here with what she's gone through.
I can't believe how useless I am. No wonder no one loves me.
Then there's the revelation that Michael is Ethan. Not a surprise, it's not like the game was trying to shock you with that reveal. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nice payoff for Rose to realize this fact. Like 7 and Village before it, we get the lore bomb before the final boss. This talks about the Megamycete and memories, why the Duke is the way he is here, the creations of the roses we come across, Evelyn returning. Shouldn't come as a surprise that these are the writings of Mother Miranda, who makes herself known.
Rose, I've waited so long for you.
But here comes Papa Winters. What follows is a retread of the final boss from the base game with Mother Miranda, but now we have all the powers. This is where the issue of not having tutorial notifications on took me a bit to figure out the keys for the powers. It is a disappointment that's just a retread of the Mother Miranda fight. I enjoyed the fight the first time around. Sure, we have different abilities here, but something more would have been great. We get a final scene between Ethan and Rose that's emotional and well done. That's why I said earlier the character beats were the better moments of the DLC.
You lost your chance. I'm so sorry.
No. It was my choice. And I don't regret it one bit. If I had left you, then we never would have had this chance to talk face to face. So it's okay.
That said, there is one major issue. It comes with Capcom's insistence of not showing Ethan's face. If there was a moment to show it, this was it. Instead, it's a distraction that takes away from an otherwise touching scene. We get a repeat of the epilogue scene of Village, and we're out. Overall, it's a pretty good DLC. While a retread of past areas, there were enough changes to them that I didn't feel like it was going through a section of reused assets. Still, it falls short of the high bar that the Resident Evil 7 DLC set. I can appreciate keeping this a self-contained DLC. That said, there were a few plot threads I hoped would receive addressing that did not. That's common for the series and I'm not surprised. I only wish there was more that we received here. 18 months later and only one DLC is a bummer after what we had for Resident Evil 7.
Lycans and gentlemen, we thank you for waiting. And now let the games begin. Let's see what you have. Ethan Winters.
With that, let's take a look back at the base game. I revisited the base game of Village before playing the DLC. At launch, I preferred Village over the base game of 7, only by a bit though. I gave 7 the edge overall with its excellent DLC included. Replaying Village, I do give the base game of 7 the nod over it, and 7 overall. RE7 had a laser-like focus on the classic survival horror style of the series of old, from resource management to level design. Village is a mixture of that style along with a more action-heavy approach like 4. Level design sticks with the traditional looping level design. Resource management receives less emphasis. There are no item boxes, although early design documents showed they planned on using them. Key items and supplies have their own separate inventory. I prefer the former approach to the latter. Village tries to accommodate both, with some compromises along the way. The result is a title that's not as coherent or as focused. One of the biggest issues I found to be the crafting system. Unlike 7, the game pauses when you go to your inventory. I'm fine with this due to the increase in action. With how much you could craft in Village, it's easy to make items just when you need them. There's no need to craft items for ammo for a gun until you're almost out. There were very few points where I felt stressed with resources. Imagine how that would change if you could only craft at certain points. For example, only the merchant could craft items for you. Of course, this approach would need a major overhaul of the game's design. Or another option would be crafting in real time, which takes time to do. This would increase the tension and bring in more of a survival horror approach to Village. The highs aren't as high, but the lows aren't as low. I didn't find a section much of a drag to get through. There's nothing like the wrecked ship section from Resident Evil 7 here. Yet there wasn't a section as intricate and well designed as the Baker House, or something as intense as the Battle of Marguerite. The castle shows promise at first, but ends up falling short. It's a mostly linear affair in how it's structured. Revisiting Village, I forgot how little Lady D and her 3 daughters end up being part of the game. Building the game around them could have been viable. Capcom didn't realize the lightning in the bottle they had until later. And even they didn't really take advantage with it in the DLC.
I can't believe Cassandra caused all this mess.
So you finally came to see me. Everyone falls for me in time. Oh, I want to eat the cute ones right up.
The first stretch until you get to the castle is very linear and cutscene heavy. Sure, you could skip them on repeat playthroughs, but feels like they could spread them out more over the course of the game. Some of my favorite moments in Village came from exploring the village. I love returning after dealing with a lord and further unlocking what was available there. No cutscenes to interrupt us. And as much as I enjoyed this, it was a disappointment that the lives of the villagers weren't fleshed out. The ones we get to know are dead and gone before we know it. Elena looked to be a key character before dying like the rest.
Ethan, go! Save your daughter!
Elena, don't give up! Reach for me! God damn it! Why is everyone dying on me?
When we got to explore these households, there's little world building for the villagers. I would love to see how more about the village was prior. There are signs that the villagers were going to be a larger part of the village before ending up getting cut. I was hoping that was going to be addressed in the DLC, but was not. House Beneviento in the basement is a fantastic stroke of psychological horror. It's something the series hasn't gone to that often. The approach they took in the DLC is more of a creepy horror. Capcom said they made RE Village in mind to be less scary than 7 due to player feedback. This led to those amusing puppet videos with the 4 lords.
この番組は怖すぎた前作の反省を受けて制作しました。
While 7 had a more visceral, in-your-face horror, Village dials most of that back. Beyond this bit in the basement, there's much less emphasis on horror. I do hope they push further back into horror in future titles. Moro's section is by far the weakest. For the most part, it's a pretty ho-hum chase sequence. He doesn't feel as fleshed out as the other lords. That's always the tricky balance. More lords, more variety. Yet more lords mean less focus on each one. Lady D and Heisenberg had great screen presence. Donna was a wild card with what she brought to the table. They had something here with how pitiful Moro could be.
You're pathetic.
Yet if they cut him and focused on the others more, I wouldn't have minded. Although the boss fight at the end with him is well done.
In death as he was in life. Disgusting.
The Lycan Stronghold before the factory is a fun combat stretch. I sometimes think they should have gone all in with either action focus or all in with survival horror. Trying to meld both worlds was admirable, but loses something as a result. Most Resident Evil titles tend to have a dip in quality at the end. Same here in Village, but in a different way. Heisenberg's factory as the last place is excellent. It's a great balance of combat focus with looping level design, returning back to the Duke on the regular. Heisenberg is such a fun presence, although the fight with him gets awfully close to jump the shark territory. Not that the series hasn't done so before.
That Boulder punching asshole! But you're first!
I do wonder if they tried to do a more grounded fight against him, or at some point he would pursue us throughout the factory. Although with his powers, making them work as a pursuer would have been a bit tricky. I've seen others ask why we weren't given the choice to choose Heisenberg with his proposal. It's made clear that Ethan wants no part in using Rose as a weapon and wants nothing to do with them.
You and me, Ethan. Together, we can go save Rose, and then we can use her to grind Miranda into paste.
My daughter is not a weapon. Fuck you!
Besides, the choice between me and Zoe in 7 ended up detracting from the game overall. The dip in quality does occur with Chris's section. Yes, it allows some time to pass between Ethan's quote-unquote death and return. Even with the more action-heavy approach of Village, it feels unnecessary. One of the gravest sins story-wise in Village is Chris's character. Chris acting like an idiot and a jerk to Ethan to keep up the charade that wasn't me at the beginning detracts from the story. How the game realizes this and calls out Chris near the end.
I know it's too late now, but we really should have told Ethan the plan.
There wasn't time. We didn't expect Miranda to act so soon.
Even so, you should have told him.
Yeah.
Now, with games, it's hard to change the story once you commit. All the motion capture, dialogue writing, recording voiceovers. It's not like a book where you could change it on a whim. This line feels like the writer realized the mistake and at least wanted to address it. I give props to addressing this mistake, but too bad it's there in the first place. Mother Miranda lacks substance as the main villain. She's outshined by the others. It's like how Sadler in RE4 wasn't as compelling as Mendez or Salazar. I do like how her story ties together the threads from RE7. What I don't care for is having her such a large role in the story, influencing Spencer's work with Umbrella. If we had more given to us by the villagers, there could be a lot more to see how she influenced the village. The scene where the villagers pray to her, love that scene.
We call on thee, within the endless dark, to deliver us into fate's hands. As the midnight moon rises on black wings, so we make our sacrifice and await the light at the end. In life and in death, we give you glory, Mother Miranda.
That's what I wanted to see more of, or discovering the remains of the village. When I first heard about the Duke, I was skeptical. Those fears faded when I realized he was his own character and not a carbon copy of the merchant. That final conversation with him is an excellent, understated exchange. It answers some questions but adds even more about who the Duke is.
Speaking of foolish questions, who or what are you?
Even I can't quite answer that.
In a game full of batshit crazy moments, this quiet exchange is one of my favorite scenes in the game. Ethan has a great send-off beyond one odd story decision. Mia should have been there as well to say goodbye for greater impact. We never got to see the real Winters family together in Village. There was something admirable about Ethan as a character. He only wants his family back. Even with Heisenberg offering him his help, he doesn't want anything to do with them. Don't get in his way of finding Rose or face the consequences. Ethan being more of the everyman character helps him stand out from the large cast of the series. Again, it's also so amusing how far Capcom would go to hide his face. Overall, while an enjoyable experience, I did find Village to fall short of what 7 was able to accomplish. For other odds and ends, let's talk about Mercenaries. While enjoyable in the base game, Ethan being the only character was a letdown. The DLC, the roster has expanded to 4 characters. Chris Redfield enters the fold. Of course, he's a punching machine. Depending on the upgrades you get, it's comical how much power these fists of his have. No wonder he's able to smash boulders.
Play with me some Cassandra more. Caused all this. Doesn't matter.
Happen.
I would only use guns to keep combos going if no enemies were nearby. The most notable inclusion is Lady Domitresque. It's good, stupid fun towering over everything. You need to crouch to get through smaller doorways. Her abilities are what you expect to get from her. Chucking the ornate vanity at goons always brought a smile to my face. I love the item description for the vanity and how she's breaking them on the regular.
To hell with the ceremony!
Heisenberg is another good addition, although I did find the least enjoyable of the 3 additions. I do wish the Duke had new lines depending on who we were playing as. They had the voice actor available, why not throw in a few? I don't find it as fun as the older Mercenaries modes, but they did a good job tweaking a mode to fit the gameplay of Village. In regards to RE-verse, I wasn't expecting much from it. I was expecting it to get cancelled at some point by the way Capcom shuffled it to the side. They kept real quiet about it. Now that it's out, nothing outstanding, but it's much better than I thought it would be. I had very low expectations for it. I was expecting a trash fire. I was ready to play a couple matches before dropping out. Yet I stuck around for a couple of hours. Neobards, being the developers, did pique my interest in Reverse. During the Silent Hill transmission, Silent Hill F was the only intriguing title to me. Neobards are the developers. So RE-verse turning out much better than I thought does give me a bit more hope for Silent Hill F. It's a simple setup. Each character has a unique layout and abilities. When you die, you'll turn to a monster at random from a handful of choices. Upon death there, you'll return to a human character. There were a decent range of abilities on both humans and monsters. The maps were familiar territory with some tweaks. Much better than I thought it would be. Granted, I didn't have much hope in it. I didn't even consider giving it a go until I learned this was the studio working on the only future Silent Hill title that looked interesting. I don't see it having many legs in regards to player numbers, but hey, they got it out the door.
You're here looking for someone? Maybe some missing señorita?
So what's next for the series? Where does Resident Evil go from here? Well, in late March 2023, the Resident Evil 4 remake will hit the shelves. According to sources who know about the project, there was some shuffling around of who was working on it. There is no confirmation if this has been the case, so take this with a grain of salt. Studio M2, who contributed to the development of Resident Evil 3 Remake, were heading the development of RE4. M2 wanted a more faithful remake of its source material. The negative reception for the changes of 3 Remake were a reason for this. Capcom wanted something inspired by the original, but also the flexibility to make tweaks to the gameplay, story, and other areas. As a result, Capcom's Division 1 is now leading the project. Again, take that for what you will. I like to think they learned from how much changing Resident Evil 3 led to its lukewarm reception compared to Resident Evil 2 Remake. While it did have some issues with cut features, I found the remake of 2 very enjoyable. Yes, for 4, expect things to change, be removed, or added, but that's the nature of remakes. Whatever happens, we always have the original from 2005. Although this is also going to be the first experience of Resident Evil 4 for many players. From what we've seen so far, the gameplay looks how I expected. Leon going all rules of nature with a knife gave me a good chuckle. It's obviously a darker tone, but there's still some of those Leon wisecracks.
Bill me for the repairs later.
Some character redesigns and voices I'm a bit unsure of, but it's hard to get a gauge in the trailer. I have more faith here than the Silent Hill 2 remake. Granted, this is also being made internally at Capcom. If it's more in the vein of Resident Evil 2 remake than the 3 remake, then it should turn out okay. But I really hope this is it for remakes. There's no need to go through the rest of the catalog. Leave things as they lie. Resident Evil 5, Code Veronica, move on. Don't you dare think about remaking the RE remake. Go back to the spin-offs. It's been a while since we've had one. There were rumors about Revelations 3 coming out after Village. What happened there? It's the perfect place to bring back fan-favorite characters who disappeared. In August 2022, an interview came out saying that Capcom first wanted RE7 to be a live service type game, one full of multiplayer and microtransactions. The type of game many developers have tried to pull off, but most fail. Could you imagine if that was the case? I wager that Resident Evil would have died off at that moment. Instead, they made a single-player title that harkened back to the older titles, and it paid off. Likewise with the remake for 2, which Capcom announced crossed the 10 million sales mark. Now we have a whole batch of franchises in the horror space playing catch up with remakes, new entries, or both. Resident Evil is still well ahead of the field. Sure, there are aspects of the last few titles where I'm a bit concerned about their future direction. But of the current franchises in the gaming landscape, I don't have major concerns about Resident Evil fucking up. To be fair, consider the fact that many studios and publishers have dropped the balls with their IPs over the last decade. It's possible the same could happen to Resident Evil, but I like to think Capcom learned from its mistakes in the late 2000s to early 2010s and we won't see a repeat. Compare that to Konami, who look to be repeating the same mistakes they made with Silent Hill after they disbanded Team Silent. I'd love to be wrong about this fact, but if the last decade or so has shown us anything, it's keep your expectations in check. Consider me optimistic with a dose of caution and skepticism for the future of Resident Evil. Yes, the IP could be better. Anything can, but could also be in a far worse state than it is. All you need to do is take a look around the gaming landscape to see that. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the channel further, consider becoming a patron or becoming a YouTube member. Get access to videos earlier, be featured in the credits, and get periodic updates. Thanks everyone. Boulder Punch out.
ちょっと待って、お色直しよ。塗り塗り、興奮してきた。敵はどこ？椅子を、どこから持ってきたのよこの椅子は。ここで一休み。サンビエルジェのワインは美味しいわね。